When we think about trauma, we often picture like battlefields or natural disasters, something huge-y, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
But today's deep dive into The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Kolk,
Yeah.
it's revealing something pretty unsettling.
Uh-huh.
Trauma is way more common than we think.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is that we often misunderstand trauma as something extraordinary, something that happens to quote unquote other people.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's disturbingly common. Think about this. 1 in 5 Americans experienced sexual molestation as a child,
Wow.
and a quarter of us grew up with alcoholic relatives.
Yes, those numbers are like a punch to the gut.
Yeah.
It's easy to brush off trauma as something out there, but this makes it clear just how many people are carrying it around.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just an individual thing, right? The book talks about how trauma ripples outward, affecting entire families and communities.
Absolutely. Trauma, by its very nature, is incredibly difficult to confront.
Yeah.
It often leads to a cycle of avoidance and dysfunction. Right.
And that impact spreads far beyond the individual.
It makes you think about those times in your own life when you went through something really tough, even if it wasn't on the same scale. Maybe a bad breakup, a job loss,
Sure.
a sudden illness in the family. It's hard enough dealing with your own emotions, but then you see how it affects everyone around you too, you know?
Exactly. And with trauma, there's this added layer of it being almost unbearable.
Right.
It can feel so overwhelming that the natural human response is to avoid it, to push it down, to try to pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
But as The Body Keeps the Score so powerfully illustrates, we can't just erase those experiences. They leave an indelible mark, not just on our minds, but on our bodies as well.
Yeah. That really hit home when I read the story about Tom, the Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
He survived this horrific ambush, but he couldn't bring himself to take medication for his debilitating nightmares.
Right.
It seemed like such a heartbreaking decision to choose the pain over potential relief. Why couldn't he just let go? Well, Tom's story perfectly illustrates how trauma can warp a person's entire world.
Okay.
For him, taking those pills, even if they offered some respite from the nightmares, meant abandoning the memory of his fallen comrades.
Oh.
Their deaths became the defining event of his life, making everything else feel meaningless.
This really highlights how trauma isn't just about the past event itself.
Right.
It's about how that event hijacks your present and even your future, making it hard to find meaning in anything else.
Precisely. It's not just about having bad memories. It's a complete transformation that affects your mind, your body, and your entire perception of the world. And that's what makes trauma so much more complex than just having a few bad dreams you need to shake off.
And that's kind of where I started to see the limitations of traditional talk therapy, like that whole talking cure we often hear about. If trauma embeds itself so deeply in our bodies, is talking about it really enough to heal those wounds?
Yeah, you've hit a crucial point. The book emphasizes that so much of the trauma experience gets trapped in the body,
Right.
not just in the conscious mind. It's like our bodies hold on to the fear, the pain, the helplessness,
Yeah.
even when our minds try to move on.
Reading about Sylvia's experience really drove that home for me. She was a young woman who'd been through something truly awful,
Mm.
force feeding in the hospital.
Mhm.
And it turned out this seemingly unrelated event, it became like this terrifying echo of her past trauma,
Right.
bringing back all the terror and helplessness of childhood sexual abuse.
Sylvia's story is a stark reminder of how important it is to approach trauma with sensitivity and awareness. You know, it highlights the danger of unintentionally replicating trauma in the very act of trying to help. We need therapeutic approaches that go beyond the intellect and address those deep-seated, like visceral responses held within the body.
Okay, so if traditional talk therapy alone isn't always enough, what are the alternatives?
Right.
How do we even begin to help people heal from something so deeply ingrained?
Well, The Body Keeps the Score explores 3 main avenues for healing trauma. The top-down, the medication-based, and the bottom-up approaches. Imagine them as different pathways leading to the same destination: recovery.
I'm hooked. Tell me more about these pathways.
Okay, so the top-down approach involves therapies like traditional talk therapy,
Okay.
cognitive behavioral therapy, or EMDR, which help people understand their trauma, process their memories, and rewire their thought patterns. These methods primarily work on the cognitive level, helping to reframe the traumatic experience and manage emotional responses.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the medication-based approach? Is that exactly what it sounds like?
Exactly. This approach utilizes medication to manage the often debilitating symptoms that can accompany trauma. Things like anxiety, depression, insomnia, or hypervigilance. These medications don't erase the trauma itself, but they can provide much-needed relief from its overwhelming effects, allowing individuals to engage in therapy and rebuild their lives.
So it's about creating a more stable foundation so the real work of healing can begin. What about the bottom-up approach, the one focused on the body?
This is where it gets really interesting. The bottom-up approach focuses on therapies that target the body's physical and sensory experiences. Think about yoga, mindfulness, dance movement therapy, or even somatic experiencing. These therapies help individuals reconnect with their bodies, release trapped tension, and regulate their nervous systems.
So it's not about choosing one path over the others, but rather finding the right combination for each individual, right?
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Some people might benefit mostly from talk therapy, while others might need a combination of medication and body-based therapies. It really depends on the person and the nature of their trauma. The key is to approach healing holistically, recognizing the intricate connection between the mind and body.
And here's where things get really interesting for me. The book delves into how trauma can actually muffle our senses. There's this quote from one of William James's patients, a woman who said, "Each of my senses, each part of my proper self, is as it were separated from me. This impossibility seems to depend upon a void which I feel in the front of my head."
Wow.
It's like trauma literally disconnects us from the world around us, leaving us feeling numb and fragmented.
What's fascinating here is how this sensory shutdown connects to the brain's proto-self.
Okay.
The part responsible for basic bodily functions, our sense of self, and our ability to navigate the world. Imagine your proto-self as your body's internal compass. When trauma disrupts that compass, it's like you're lost at sea. You don't know which way is up, and even simple decisions feel impossible.
Wow, that analogy really paints a vivid picture. No wonder it feels so disorienting and overwhelming.
It absolutely is. And this disruption of the proto-self is a major reason why traditional talk therapy alone often falls short in treating trauma, because we need to help individuals reconnect with their bodies, rebuild that internal sense of safety, and reclaim their agency in the world.
This whole conversation makes me wonder, like, if our sense of self gets disrupted by trauma, how do we even begin to rebuild those connections
Right.
with ourselves and with other people?
Yeah.
Especially when our instinct might be to like withdraw and isolate ourselves,
Sure.
even though like connection is what we need most.
You've hit upon a crucial paradox.
Yeah.
Social connection is absolutely essential for healing from trauma, but it can also feel terrifying for survivors.
Mhm.
It's like a catch-22. You need it to heal.
Right.
But trauma often makes it incredibly difficult to trust and connect.
Okay, so how do we bridge that gap?
Right.
How do we create a safe space where connection becomes possible again?
Well, the book introduces this fascinating concept called the polyvagal theory,
Okay.
which focuses on the vagus nerve. And get this one nerve,
Uh-huh.
the vagus nerve,
Yeah.
plays a huge role in regulating our responses to stress and threat. It's like the body's internal alarm system, always on the lookout for danger.
Whoa, I had no idea this one nerve was involved in both heartbreak and gut feelings.
I know, right?
It's like the grand central station of our emotional system.
It is.
So tell me more about this polyvagal theory.
Okay.
How does it relate to trauma?
So the polyvagal theory describes three main responses to threat: social engagement, fight or flight, and collapse.
Okay.
In a healthy system, these responses work in harmony,
Right.
helping us navigate the ups and downs of life.
Yeah.
Imagine it like a beautifully choreographed dance with each response taking the lead when needed. But trauma disrupts this delicate dance, throwing the system out of whack.
So when you feel that urge to flee a stressful meeting or like shut down emotionally after an argument,
Right.
that's your vagus nerve kicking into gear.
Right.
Trauma just makes these responses way more extreme and
Yeah.
way harder to control, right?
Exactly. And this is where those body-focused therapies we talked about come in.
Okay.
Practices like yoga, breath work, and meditation can help soothe the vagus nerve, bringing the system back into balance.
That makes sense. The book also mentions EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as like a powerful tool for some people.
Right.
It sounds a bit unconventional, but the research suggests it can be really effective in helping the brain reprocess traumatic memories.
It is unconventional,
Yeah.
but for many, it provides a way to approach those painful memories in a safe, controlled environment, allowing them to integrate the experience without feeling overwhelmed by it.
This has been incredibly insightful. So if someone's listening to this and feeling stuck, feeling like they're carrying the weight of past trauma, what's the key takeaway? What should they do?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that healing is possible. It might not be easy and it might take time, but there are pathways to recovery. If you feel stuck, consider exploring therapies that work with both the body and the mind. Because as the body keeps the score so powerfully shows us, trauma is not just a mental experience, it's a full body experience.
It's about recognizing that our bodies hold on to trauma, sometimes in ways we don't even realize. Those unexplained aches and pains, those sudden bursts of anger that seem to come out of nowhere,
Right.
those could be our bodies trying to tell us a story.
Exactly, trying to get our attention.
The body keeps the score is a powerful reminder that we are not alone in our experiences. It shines a light on the prevalence of trauma and offers a message of hope and healing. If this deep dive resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out the book. It's a profound exploration of a complex issue, and it offers practical guidance for those seeking to understand and heal from trauma. And remember, seeking support is a sign of strength, not weakness. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.